Me neither, so I'm good. Oh, we are live on Facebook too.
Let's see. Is it already coming up for you?
Live on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay. So don't watch the Facebook page though. Just watch.
Sorry, guys.
Stay in the Zoom app.
Yeah, I like the Zoom app.
Okay.
Me too.
Well, we want to introduce this. So we started Open Center Lives a few weeks ago, and a lot has happened in the last week. And so rather than do our normal Open Center Live, we could think of nothing better to do than listen to our own family, our own staff, about what's going on and hear from diverse voices and viewpoints. So I'm honored to be joined here by Miguel and Araceli Enoya. Actually, you can decide which one you want to go by, and you can even talk about that.
I will explain that, exactly.
That would be great to explain. So really without saying, the only thing I want to say is this, as an organization, we just put out a statement a little bit ago, and we understand we need to do a lot of listening. So I just want to set a little context for this. This is part of us listening to our own people and allowing our community to also listen to our own people, because they don't get to hear from you guys a lot of the time.
Yep.
So really just, honored to be on with you. I love you two both so much, you know that. So I'm gonna let y'all take it away.
Okay.
Go ahead, Araceli. You go first. Ladies first.
All right. Of course, my name is Enoya Araceli Brown, and I am Central American from Honduras. The reason that my family decided to come into the United States, which as I was 5 years old at the time, is because my father was actually on a plane going to see a football game in Mexico, or soccer. And by the time he went back to Honduras, he had been named a communist because he was sitting next to one. So it was advised that he leave the country, because if not, we would never see him again. So we had about 6 months to figure out how to get a visa into the United States, because we had relatives here. And so my father, who basically had a third grade education, I think, he was, he didn't want to leave. He loved his country. He loved his friends. He loved his job. But my mother said to me, and I was 5, she said to me, we have to hurry and make sure we get over there, because your father's going to come running back. And so we left in 1965. And I remember at 5 years old that I was on a plane into New York, and there were Vietnam soldiers standing in the aisle holding on to the seats because there was no other transport for them. So I was seeing all of this. And then I went into the New Orleans airport, and I saw an African-American man wearing a big raccoon tall, like long coat. And I was like, mesmerized by this vision of this big long coat and this guy. And he was a very happy man. And then my mother said, we're going to go down the escalator. And I said, no escalator for me. So we went into New York from that airport, and we went into, we were in a blizzard in New York at that time. So that was another big impression. My name, my father actually, it came from my uncle, because my father's background is, I think, probably Welsh and German and British. And these were people who were boat people or Navy people back in the 30s who ended up in the islands of Honduras. So he grew up as looking very white. He knew the indigenous language of the Guarifanas, and the Guarifanas are actually Black people in the islands of Honduras. He knew their dialect. His first language was English because he was in the islands. But back in the 50s, Honduras said, all the islands have to learn Spanish because you belong to us. So he learned Spanish, of course, but as a young boy. So of course he was trilingual. And that's who my parents basically were. My mother was basically of Mayan descent, especially because of my grandfather on her end. And, you know, basically we don't come from money. So I ended up here in the US, grew up here. And eventually one day in about 1993, I came to work at the Open Center. So now I'm at the Open Center, and in around the year 2000, I started to become a program director who worked a lot with Afro and Latin programs, which I really didn't know that much about, but I was introduced by friends of mine to many scholars in the African American community that were scholars in the Ivy League level, at an Ivy League level, and they came to teach at the Open Center. It was fantastic and moving information, some things that I would never have learned otherwise if I had not taken these classes with somebody who came from the Congo, teacher. One was an herbalist. One was actually identifying bones from ancient Africa for many museums around the world. But he taught us about beliefs and understandings. And the thing that I started to see was that a lot of people that were Caucasian or white did not attend. And I began to figure out, or actually was told, that people were afraid. Actually, today I was asked by someone through an email, can I attend the class coming up at the end of June that has to do with grief rites and rituals for healing for African American culture? I'm like, it's open to everyone. But it's not something that sometimes people are afraid, or maybe this is just for, you know, people of color. It's not for me. But the more inclusion, the better information. And of course, you become less afraid of other people. That's the whole point. The more you learn, the more you find you have in common. And that's how I am a program director at the Open Center, and that's what I like to focus on. I also try to focus on that one theme when it came to 9/11 and the whole situation that Islam was evil. I went to search for scholars who taught me about that, who I found in Europe and in Spain. Again, I was uplifted, even in the presence of a great saint called Ibn Arabi, who is from Islamic Sufi tradition. And you could feel the presence of holiness in the room. And I said, more people need to know about this. This is extremely elevating. It's filled with love. I cannot even not put it into words. But currently there's a great sadness for me, because over the years I have experienced things that have to do with racism, not sometimes directly with me, because I kind of pass. And I made it sure that I sounded very American, because I have an ear for language. And I don't have as much of an accent. But something happened to me on the streets down in Delancey Street. I knew of this woman who wanted to go on the Delancey Street Tenement Square tour guide. We wanted to learn more about the immigrants back in the 20s in New York. So we were on the street, and there were about 15, 20 people on the tour. And they started to say, you know, a lot of the immigrants didn't know the language, didn't know English. And so she turned around, this person that I was with, and said, well, her mother doesn't know English. She doesn't speak English. And I thought, well, I don't understand this at all, but it was very painful. And I said, first of all, who told you that she doesn't know? She's just afraid to speak it sometimes. She'd never met her. She's afraid to speak it because she's afraid she's going to be judged for not knowing how to pronounce it correctly. But she understands everything that she sees on television and so on. And that came out of the blue. I have a friend who used to work at the Open Center, and she's actually very Latin looking, but she comes from the Texas area. And her mother raised her not to learn Spanish so she wouldn't be discriminated against. And now that she lives in the New York area, she says, I really miss the ability to actually have learned the language in Spanish, because now I don't have it. And so it should be a plus and it should be advantage. Like the Europeans see it as learning 4 or 5 languages. Professionally, it gets you a better job and gets you to travel, but it's not seen that way here. So, you know, we had something like this a few months ago, or maybe 2 years ago, where people were speaking Spanish in stores and they were being told not to do that. How dare you speak Spanish? You should be speaking English. I'm like, these people are bilingual. So again, I'm not grasping why that happens or why people think that way. It has to be based on some sort of fear. The other thing that I see a lot that I also want to bring up is how the United States sees the American flag. The American flag is supposed to be a great symbol around the world, and especially for soldiers who fight injustices across the seas to defend this country and its beliefs. When we have people who are suffering injustices within this country, that should be the same. That should be, because the flag is not limited. It has many portions, many representations of all the people that live here. Why is it just narrow to only one group of people? And so that whole thing with the football and the kneeling, I did not understand how people can defend it, that kneeling meant that you couldn't do it because you were in some way directly offending soldiers. In fact, it's another injustice within. So the flag is much bigger, I think, has more generosity, it's more inclusive, and it could represent many, many themes of who this nation can stand for. I see it that way, and I hope other people start to understand that in that way. But for now, I'd like to open this up to Miguel.
Okay. My name is Miguel Rosario. I have worked at the New York Open Center for like about 10 or 11 years now. I came in under the auspices of Giselle Andujar, who was production manager at the time. And, you know, I'm originally from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. I was born in America, but my family is from the Caribbean, from Puerto Rico. My father's Puerto Rican, my mother's Dominican. My father fought in the Korean War with one of the infantries that were conscripted to go fight, you know, and he came into America, you know, he got his GI Bill and he founded a business, met my mother, who also came here after tumultuous riots and the assassination of a tyrannical leader in my home country, or in my country, my mother's home country, by the name of Trujillo. Trujillo was a tremendous and terrible dictator whose family terrorized the inhabitants, all of us, and made it so that only people who were lighter skinned or of European descent, because if you don't know, what the Dominican Republic is, a mixture of African, Europeans, and indigenous populations. The African population is numerous, and their descendants are numerous even among us. Even in my family, my grandmother, if you was to look at my grandmother, you would assume that she was an African-American woman. And then to see my mother, you would think she was adopted, because they're completely different skin tones. So in our culture, there has permeated the sense that whiteness was equated to elevated status and wealth and privilege, you know. So, but my mother, and God bless her and God bless my family, that my mother never believed in that stuff. My mother was tear gassed and thrown rocks at and rubber bullets and all that stuff. She was part of the great protests that were happening at the time in the Dominican Republic. But when she had a chance to escape, when Trujillo finally was overthrown and murdered and assassinated, her father, my grandfather, got her a way to come to the United States. But she, at the time, was a single unmarried woman. So she had to go through Europe into Austria, to Salzburg, to get an American passport to come into the United States because that's the only way they would do it for a woman who was single and not married at the time. Archaic, backward laws of these yesteryears. But she did it. She got into America, and she's lived here her entire life. We grew up, the neighborhood I grew up in was Chelsea, the West Side, and the West Village. So I didn't know race was an issue till like about 7. Because in my neighborhood, I grew up in a bohemian, artsy, very dynamic, very inclusive, and very racially diverse neighborhood. So by the time I was becoming aware of life itself, I had friends of all colors. And my first memory of actual racism was I had a friend by the name of Tyrone. I loved him. I used to love palling around with him in the neighborhood. And one of the elder women of the block, a Spanish woman too, told me, "Why do you play with him?" And at first I was like, "But because I like him." I couldn't fathom why she was asking that particular question. And then she proceeded to tell me, "You shouldn't play with people like him. They're not of your class. They're not of your status." And I didn't get it. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to play with him anyway. Who are you to tell me who to play with? It was only after that I started realizing that she wasn't referring to him as a person. She was referring to his color, and I was like, it was almost an alien concept to me because prior to that, I had no clue that even existed, that we would judge others by skin color. It didn't occur to me. It just didn't occur to me. Coming from the neighborhood I grew up in, that wasn't really a problem. It was there, as it always is. It's always lurking in the background somewhere. But it didn't occur to me till after that was the problem. And I vowed and said to myself that I would never be like that person. I would never want to be like that. I loved everyone and wanted to be around everyone and wanted to learn from everyone. And I was fortunate enough to be in a neighborhood where I knew people from the deepest parts of Africa and from Iceland simultaneously. It was beautiful. I knew an Icelandic family. There are only 50 to 70,000 of them in existence. So to meet a 4 of a mother, father, sister, daughter and son was a rarity, because since then I have not met any other Icelandic people. But I knew them. They were neighbors and they were very lovely people. And so I was privileged in that way to grow up in a really decent neighborhood, and knowing how much color was now playing an issue, I decided just to go another route and become a different person and not be like that. So my growing up led to other things. Like I started discovering that there was one more little thing about me that I wasn't aware of until I became a teenager, and that was my status as a gay man. I started learning that at 13 and discovering who I was. And I didn't know where to turn to either, and I found out that I was living right in the proper neighborhood for that kind of development. So I found a group called the Gay and Lesbian Youth of New York, which is based at the not the New York Open Center, at the Gay and Lesbian Community Center, which is on 13th Street, which is another great organization. There was a youth program there that saved me from the worst elements of the streets. Back in those days, being a young Christian Latin male meant being outed was a death sentence. You were kicked out, disowned, your church excommunicated you. I mean, everything was, all heaps of dishonor was heaped upon you. Like you were just cast out. And I saw a lot of young children of color that never made it, that never grew up, died on the streets because no one cared, no one loved them. They were ostracized and they had to turn to prostitution and drugs. And it was awful. But this group came around and saved a lot of us. And thanks to them, I was able to mature into a young Latin gay male and I started protesting with ACT UP. I was too young at the time, and they would keep me off to the side because they thought I would be injured or hurt. So they didn't want me to go to the real protests. So they kept me in the sidelines and had me do copies and stuff. But it was okay. I didn't care. I was part of the movement, you know? So, so in essence, I've kind of always been protesting injustice, whether it be injustice towards the LGBTQ community or to the communities of color, to the indigenous peoples of our land. I've always fought so that they can have a place at the communal table with the rest of us, you know? And, you know, so when all of this started happening, you know, when I saw that video that sent our country ablaze, I knew that that would be the catalyst for this. I knew that that would send shockwaves through everyone, I mean, I've never, you know, I am actually so proud of the way some of the protesters have stood up in solidarity. Like, I've never seen so many diverse groups of people actually stand up for the first. I've been in tears all week because I've seen just such lovely acts of beauty among all of us, and this hopefully will change the narrative, you know, once and for all. You know, I've lived scared. You know, I've interacted with police. I know how they talk to you. You know, even if they're not violent against you, they talk down to you as if you don't exist, as if you're nothing to them, as if they have that power over you. You know, even when I ask them questions, if I'm lost, they're like, yeah, it's that way. Like, they don't want to be bothered. And it's like, okay, so why are you policing? You know, like it's, you know, I've seen the horrors of what they can do to us. Even in the most passive sense, they're still dictatorial in some ways. And I hope that this all sends our government to actually start taking away these institutions that were set up to protect them and actually segregate them and give them a different form of justice than the rest of us have. You know, it's a two-tier justice system. There's justice for us, and then there's a specialized justice for them. You know, I mean, there's so many lobbies right now who actually go to Congress and actually fight for these, you know, for these rights that, you know, I don't even know why we can't sue cops or why we can't pursue any kind of legal action against them. It's almost unbelievable how they've managed to just literally take over, you know, and it's scary. I've seen so much, and, you know, this gives me great hope. This it's been scary because, I mean, personally, just like this Monday, a band of looters went running through my block, destroying our grocery store, the liquor store, the Duane Reade. They robbed the gas station. So there were some scary moments, and there were some scary, you know, some scary things going on. But at the same time, there's also a lot of great hope. And I would encourage everyone too to listen to Reverend Al Sharpton's eulogy at yesterday's memorial. It was very, very uplifting and very moving, and very inspirational. And I think that as a center now, we are in a position to actually start doing something, you know, start speaking like we're doing today. This is a great first step, and I think it will help in the coming weeks, because there's a lot of healing now that needs to be done. There's a lot of people that need spiritual guidance, especially now. A lot of people seem, you know, when you see videos like the videos we've been seeing all week, and just even today, a video surfaced of an elderly gentleman being shoved by the police in such a grotesque manner that he fell and cracked his head in front of all of us, bleeding on the street, and they did nothing. It was only when people started screaming at the top of their lungs did they go back and help this poor man, you know? And I'm like, yeah, this has got to stop. This is why we need the spiritual guidance, you know, not only just for us, but for the police themselves, because among them, there are many people of color, many indigenous peoples who work as police officers, sheriffs here in New York and across the United States. and they're scared. They want help. They want to stop this as well. I could see it in their faces. You could see it in all their faces. They're scared. They're just as scared as we are. So I think taking a holistic and spiritual approach to how we deal with this would be beneficial to both sides.
It's true. Just to point out this one thing that I wholeheartedly believe, and I also remember one of our teachers that has been here from Ireland, which is Lorna Byrne, who pointed to the United States, and even Americans don't believe this, but who pointed to the United States as a beacon of light to the rest of the planet. And she says, as long as you behave in a manner that is spiritual and above, she said, you will be given greatness, and you have to be the example because people are listening. And the one example that came up for me when she said people are listening is that I have family members come in from Central America to see the ball drop in Times Square, which is a crazy time to go in there, but I went in there for them. And it was like chaos and madness. There were beautiful horses with cops on them all over the place. But my cousin, who happens to be in his 40s, he is a famous gynecologist in Honduras, and he actually an obstetrician. And he brought his 3 children and his wife. And I needed directions, so I needed to go off to the cop there. I needed to talk to the police, and I needed to ask for directions because they're the only ones who let you through from block to block. My male cousin was like terrified. He was like, you talk to them? And I said, yeah, I have to ask them a question. And of course, the police officer or the cop was very, yeah, so what do you want? Yeah, you can't go over there. I said, these people have come from Central America. They need to go past this. I said, we have to go past. And so he said, all right, let me figure something out. So my cousin was like, we couldn't have made it without you. And I thought, that's the impression that they get, even from the police in this country. The police in this country becomes a model to other countries of how the police force treat its people. So we are a spiritual model. And I think one of the things that can also happen, aside from laws being placed about how to change the way that they work with people, is that they also have to be introduced as a community of police to other ways to handle their stress, to interact with other races. They have to be educated on a different level. It's not the 6 months how to, I know there's a lot of stress with being killed, basically. That is huge. But there has to be a re-education so that their energy coming across will be less feared and their language skills change, because they're so reactive. It is so like, it's me or you, I will be killed, therefore I'm going to do it to you. That's the impression that I always get. And it's changed, it's gotten worse. I've only been on the other side of a police gun when I called them because I thought somebody was burglarizing our building, and I went to open the door for them and he panicked. I opened the door and he went to me like that. And I was on the other side of that gun, and I thought, he said, you shouldn't have done that. I was like, I didn't know. I was 14 years old. What did I know? But now that gun would have gone off, I think. And I may not have made it. So it's a very different mentality. But anyway, there is so much that I think we can do. And I think the people of this country, I think, are the ones who have the ear of the world, who actually can teach through their generosity and love and spirit, not the government. People look to the people. Forget about the government. They look to the people. Those are the people they want to hear from and respect. And that's what actually will make the government move in that direction. That's how I see that happening. So those are my 2 cents.
I agree, Araceli. I mean, there are, the way they're trained, the way they are taught. I mean, other European countries or first world countries go to do 2 years of extensive training with heavy focus on the different gradations in policing. I mean, you can't send an untrained person to deal with a mentally unstable one.
That's the other
Especially
problem.
if they're armed. You can't do that because you're not trained for that, and then their whole culture is based on that rough mentality. I mean, do you know their motto is actually sickening? Like, their motto is better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. You see how that permeates. You see why they're so
Wow.
afraid. That needs to be shifted into a more spiritual thing, because that they're gonna kill you before you kill them. It's like, oh my God, it's like they come out on the street jacked up, all ready to kill. Instead of coming out with the mentality of, well, there are certain types of people, there are certain types of groups, and this is how we have to approach each and every single one of them. Community policing is also, yeah, it is a lot to ask, but you know what? There are successful programs in other countries where it works just fine. It all boils down to the training, how we train these people to see their own people, because at the end of the day, police have civilian families and friends out there. I'm pretty sure that a lot of the police officers out there on the streets ran into their own family members protesting them.
Sometimes.
So yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know, I know they don't want to turn their guns on their sister who is in the crowd protesting too. So there's got to be a way to de-escalate them, bring them down from that mentality of like, oh my God, better to be judged by 12 than carried out by 6. And the reason why they say that, and it's a horrible thing, but it's a factual one. They are more likely to get off by a jury of their peers, or by the prosecutors who are their friends and work with them on a daily basis. We need to separate all of that. We need to literally rebuild the justice system from the ground up, especially when it comes to policing, and especially when it deals with laws that are there to protect police unnecessarily. Like you can't.
It's a 6-month training, right?
It's 6 months. 6 to 9 months at tops, and I'm like, yeah, that's not enough to actually train someone. And then when you are trained and sent down, there are like at any job, even at our own beloved Open Center, 3 strikes and you're out. If you keep making mistakes that will damage the reputation or damage something at the center, you're out. You're not going to be employed there. The guy who's the police officer that killed George Floyd had 12 disciplinary actions against him, and nothing was ever done. I mean, under normal circumstances at a job, you're fired after the 3rd one. That's it. No severance pay. Get out. You're doing a disservice to our company. And I think those kind of officers are doing a disservice to the legitimate officers that are actually policing and actually doing their job. And another thing they need to do is
hurts
focus.
them a lot.
Yeah, it hurts them. And what they need to do is actually really go into the communities. I mean, whatever happened to Officer Smith, the guy who used to walk the beat and said hi to all the store owners, and all the kids on the block knew him. Where did they go? What happened to Officer Smith? Where did he go? They took him off and replaced him with fully armored exoskeleton, huge weapon guns.
RoboCop.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Where did this go? Yeah.
So a lot of re-education. I hope that I'm able to offer a lot more types of education through the Open Center that can help people understand the roots of other cultures, to actually experience spirituality through that culture, the light through that culture. There's so much that's not known about. And one of the trigger words, even in the practices of spiritual communities in the Caribbean, was the word voodoo. Now, I came across a few scholars who work in that area, and these are professors over there at universities, maybe in, I think, Virginia or North Carolina. And I had one of them come to the Open Center to teach about it. And I did ask the question, well, you know, how this is seen. I said, it's seen basically as dark magic or sorcery. He says, that's not the way, that's not how this was invented. It was created, he says, to on the highest level of light to meet with the creator. He says, and that's how I associate it even in the realm of quantum physics. So his book was called Voodoo and Quantum Physics. So that's where
Love
it
the
was.
title.
Yeah, so he said, so the thing about sorcery, that is something that has been bastardized and created. And I know that actually the education of the United States sometimes on that topic alone, I think comes from something when you used to watch the Abbott and Costello movies in the 1950s and The Walking Dead. And that's where it stopped. That's where it stopped. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to believe in the culture, but you can learn to respect it and understand how that is, because this is from another time period. So everybody has, but the more you learn, the less afraid you are. And I think that goes a long way.
What,
Yeah. Go ahead, Ross.
what do you guys both think we can be doing as a center? And I say that for our community, and also, Miguel, you alluded to, for the police force themselves. I mean, we care about everybody. We actually have programs right now to help first responders reduce stress and anxiety due to what's going on with COVID. So, what can we do for both sides of this equation?
There's, at least from my perspective, yes, I can bring some courses, but I also think that one of the things I used to do, and I keep saying this, is to sometimes go to where the people are and take the open center there, be it either in communities and do talking points on what's available, but not, and sometimes just an understanding that opens up your mind to different worlds. And the same thing with the police. I mean, I thought about bringing in the police even just for doing equine training and how do you do healing on horses, because the police that work with horses are very proud of that job. They love their animals and also their dogs. And they are also police officers, the dogs. And these animals will stand in the way of a bullet. But these officers, I mean, this is their family. So I would like to see if that's a possibility to offer that as well, because there are so many different ways that you can start with education, with understanding and moving there to, instead of closing, that's what we've been doing, is closing doors. So we go and visit, we go and invite, and it becomes like less fear, I think, and becomes a larger understanding of who we are and what we can relate to with other people. So now when you see somebody, it is like, yeah, we're on the same boat. And a lot of people have already established that, but as a society, I think that stuff from hundreds of years ago to the 1950s is still not been healed. And I think things don't go away. If you don't heal them, they still remain there. They become part of our DNA. So that's what I'm saying. We need to start working with that. We have a lot of ways of doing that.
Agreed. I think also one simple way to start this would be, once the open center is back and operational and COVID-19 hopefully will be behind us, and so will these tumultuous times, then maybe when we do our open house and have a celebration of life like we do, I think we should invite some of the leaders of the nearby precinct in. Maybe a couple of them would want to stop in and see what we're about. Have them talk to us. Come, they're literally right up the block from us. And maybe we can invite some of them to actually participate in the night's event. Doesn't have to be that many. A couple of them, maybe of the higher echelons, they're their leaders, the captain, a couple of detectives, a couple of beat cops, to come in and actually see what we are. They pass by us all the time. I have had a couple of decent interactions with them. Like, like there was a time where, somebody set off the alarms and couldn't quite shut them off. So the police have to respond to that. And when they come in, and it's happened to me, and when they've come in, I told them, I said, I apologize. It was me. I set off the alarms by mistake. please forgive me. And they were very understanding. I even offered them coffee, and they were very sweet about it. So, and you realize that they are people that they want to. One of them even asked me, "What is this place?" And I sat there. And I told them what we were. I told them what we do here. You know, and I think they can benefit from coming in and being around spiritual people, being around spiritual energy, being around the good energy that comes from being part of this organization and part of being a holistic group of people. It might resonate in them to actually bring more of them into the fold and come to the center and visit. Maybe even offer the meditation room as a space to them where they can decompress, because we forget that the good ones and the ones that do their job and the ones that are compliant and are trying to help see a lot of terrible things throughout the day. Abuses, whether it be towards women or children, or horrible accidents that they have to be at. That weighs on them. It weighs heavily on
And they
them.
don't talk to anybody about it either.
And they don't talk to anybody or have any place to even just for the moment decompress and go over what they have just witnessed, what just happened to them, and how they feel about it. So
Because
maybe
they're
we
tough
can
people.
yeah, and they put that toughness sometimes even above their spiritual center. They say, I must be this because this is what's ingrained in me. But no, anyone knows that a good warrior always must balance his poet.
Thank you.
We had, with our partners, Operation Warrior Shield, we've had 2 events at the Open Center in the last 6 months, 7 months maybe. And the New York Police Department's head of health and wellness was actually in our building. And I know they are interested in doing things with us going forward. Because I think as we are the Open Center, like part of the reason we're the Open Center is because we're open to all lineages and wisdom traditions and practices and religions and philosophies and psychologies. We're open to all that. We're also open to every color and ethnicity and, flavor of sexuality, gender, of people. But I think this last piece, Miguel's a mixture of many of those things, which is awesome. We're also open to the different, I like, the police do not often get thought of, I think, in this regard of like, oh, we're going to have spiritual practice stuff for the police. Like, I know they've had trouble getting meditation into a lot of the police forces across the country.
Yep.
So I think we are open to everybody, and I appreciate both of you guys saying that. And we've tried, and, Araceli, do you want to share a little bit about, I know you've programmed stuff for years, and in my conversations with other centers, the retreat centers around the country, they'll look at us and they're envious of our diversity.
That's right.
We have a very, like, just for everybody to know, if you haven't been in the Open Center a while, we have a pretty diverse staff. And, our teachers, our faculty, while it's got some diversity, I think all of us would prefer it had more. And when people say to me, oh, but it looks like you guys have so much diversity among your staff, I'm like, well, we also live in New York. So like any company in New York, generally, it's easier for us to have more diversity. Araceli, talk a little bit about the difficulty that we've had with programming diversity.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things.
Miguel made a really good point to me about how many of the things we teach, many of these traditions started in Black and Indigenous cultures to begin with. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Well, Africa is the root of civilization, according to archaeology and paleontology and all of this. And I haven't even studied up on this, but this is part of the information that has been studied. And when I just in general, bringing in the programs into the Open Center back in, I think, the 90s, what I found was that the approach into working with the communities, be it Afro-Latin communities, was that couldn't really sit at a desk and be sending out information. I said, that's not going to work because we are going to be considered a white organization. And it's like, who are you? So um, I started to take the Open Center and the bookstore. Physically, we went into fairs, street fairs, and we went into, everybody knows this, the Boys and Girls big event that happens in July in Brooklyn. And it's basically Africans as well, and Afro-Americans and Caribbeans, and it's all like wares and all kinds of things that are made by hand, and uh,
Hmm.
it's all cultural, but it's all from diaspora. That's what it is. And so we went there, and we're like standing out like a sore thumb because it was like, who are you people? And I was like, well, I have a lot of information. And I also found a lot of talent there at the time that I said, oh, I love this person that's teaching this. Actually, she became quite famous later on, but I brought her to the Open Center and she started teaching. And it was actually a proud moment when we used to have like 60 to 80 African American women walk into the center because they were going to take this class that had to do with, I want to make my own products with Lisa Price. I want to learn how to do that from Carol's daughter. And there were other moments like that. We had, and again, there is a fear, and I didn't understand this. There is a fear of a person who's white to actually register for a course that they see as under African Americans. They think, I'm not going to be welcome there. And I've heard this. So one woman actually registered for one of our scholars that was teaching, and she wrote back on the feedback form and she said, why don't more people know about this guy? The information he's giving is fantastic. He actually was drafted by one of the Brooklyn schools for children that were like, I guess, small children up to teenage years. And they were all African-American children. But the woman who ran the organization wanted him to come and teach these children what are the roots of your culture. Where did you come from? And this is something that also is not out there. I mean, if you go to an Ivy League college, I guess you can learn about that, but not everyone has that privilege, to be able to go.
Hmm.
So what happens
Right.
is there was a lot of learning there, and there needs to be more. But I found that the only way that I could communicate was by either radio, which I did a lot of in the Latin and Afro community. I even went on Univision Channel 41, brought the cameras in from a morning show into the Open Center at 6 in the morning. And there we were with our Argentinian, like Reiki cranial sacral guy, whose name was Diego. They didn't even believe his name. They didn't believe his name. And the interviewer said, is your name really Diego? Anyway, there was the bodywork table in the tea house in those days. And I said, God, I said, we're on Univision. No one knew this. I did this by myself because I said, I don't know what's going to happen. But we were national on that TV show in the morning. I was very proud of that because I was trying to hit different portions of New York. And I was not able to continue that type of programming because it was basically about cultural roots. That's why it was isolated. It was about cultural roots, and it was a gift. It was really a gift to me, to the community, to the Open Center, but the funding, a lot of it was not there, of course, and I became like an ant, working a lot, and more programs and trainings needed to be worked on, and our staff got smaller, so I was not able to go there, and I want to be able to revive that because. I think that a lot of universities would look forward to working with us in those areas, as well as building conferences. And of course, one of my favorites, I took about 20 students from the Open Center down to Mexico City to understand with the teacher who was at the time teaching about curanderismo.
Yep.
And they went to learn about the culture itself, the roots went to the actual pyramids. And on that trip was Kathy Davis from WBAI, who's actually a very well-known host that also has interviewed many of our speakers. And so this is where the fun and the greatness was of this. And when people would discovered it, they were like so excited. And I said, yeah, this is great. So I want to revive and relive that again, and also bring more teachers of color into the catalog, because I think for most is it companies or organizations within an urban city like New York, you always have to understand that that's part of the responsibility that you hold, because you also want to be in the position to help a lot of communities who are not being given information or education or some form of light. And people get depressed when they're, stuck and you don't have money and all this stuff. There's all levels, though. There's all levels of within the communities, all levels of people that exist. And it's me also learning, how do I communicate? What am I learning? How do I become a better person working with this? And it's endless, actually. But when you stop learning and you stay within your own little world, that's when things happen that are happening like this. And I think our job is to actually try to open those doors. That's how I see it.
Exactly, because once you recognize that the origin of our spirituality comes from one, all of us who are spiritual or religious in some form, we have to realize that spirituality is in essence just one thing. We all diverge from that. So I think bringing the spiritual aspects to a lot of what's going on is most definitely going to help heal, and most definitely going to bring people back into the fold. We need to really, there's been a lot of anger expressed without spirituality as a guide point. So we need to have that anger expressed and expelled, and then come back, bring back people so they can learn where they come from, where their roots are, why all this is happening, and heal everything. Otherwise, this is just going to continue.
Spirituality as a guide point. That's a powerful thing to say, man.
No, but that's the way it should be. It should be spirituality. Everything that's done, whether it's quantum science, or you just living your basic life, spirituality is at the focal point of it, because spirituality gives us morality, guidance, decency. It tells us how to do things, or shows us how to do things with a modicum of respect for the world we have around us, for the very nature we exist in. So it has to be a focal point.
Thank you.
I think that is such a beautiful note to close on. I think I want to say too, y'all might be surprised to know Miguel is not one of our faculty or teachers. Miguel is in our cafe. This is the type of people. This is what is so freaking cool. It's what's so awesome about the Open Center. Is like, these are the type of people you interact with every day, having conversations like this. Yeah, you come in to get a cup of coffee, you're going to talk to Miguel, and this is the type of conversation you're having. Man, yep. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We do look forward to opening back up in person. I can't say when, hope sooner than later. We are online. Almost all our classes are online right now, so it's good to remind everybody of that. But thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Tough, odd, difficult, tough times right now, and it's good for us to get together as a family. We did Monday night. We got together with a lot of our staff and shared what's going on, and so it's good to continue that. We'll continue listening as an organization. We'll continue sharing from a lot of our diverse voices. Love you both.
Love you back.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Love you. Oh my goodness. How do I end this?